Hello. I thought in the interest of time, I would once again record the narration, the lesson about men's wear in the Crinoline period, 1850 to 1870. I got started on this in class, but we didn't get to finish it. So I thought I would just go through it and let you watch it. So here we are at the beginning of the discussion on men in the crinoline period. Their undergarments, once again, we have underdrawers of some variety. They could be all the way to the ankle or shorter, and also something that they're referring to as an undervest. And that is like an undershirt. And you can see the picture here. It's a buttoned up kind of off center, which is interesting. But men do have something to wear as a layer in between their shirt and their skin. And the men's shirts look pretty much like this shirt in the bottom left here. They were constructed without collars because a new thing in this time period are disposable shirt collars that you could purchase that were made out of linen glued onto to stiff paper, um, and you would button these onto the collar of the shirt, and you could buy them in different styles. When they'd get dirty, you just throw them away. So you could use the same basic shirt and change the look for daytime or evening by changing the collar. So here's a couple of the new collar styles that come in the 1860s, and everything from bending down the two-point collar like we've seen before, and it starts to look like a regular shirt collar of today, or what's called a wingtip collar here, which was taking those 2 points from years ago and bending them down. This is going to be worn during the day as well as the evening during this time period and for a few decades to come. Now it's a wingtip collar is just worn for formal wear. Here's some examples of the kind of neckwear. The next few slides are several different examples of neckwear from this crinoline 20 years. We still have cravats, and sometimes neck pieces are referred to as just cravats. But one thing that I've noticed is, first of all, these two gents here have what looks to be almost like a modern long necktie that they've just kind of done in a square knot and left the two ends hang. So that is one style. But also the bow tie, which evolved from tying of the cravat in the front of the neck, starts out in the 1850s as a really big bow tie. And you can see in some of these pictures, sometimes they're soft, like the gentleman in the upper right. Sometimes they're huge, like the gentleman in the lower left. And sometimes they're soft, sometimes they're hard, but they're relatively large. As opposed to when we get into the 1860s, bow ties are still popular, but they're much smaller. And of course, these are worn hand tied. They didn't have any kind of pre-rigged ties like we do today. And you can see this gentleman looks like he's wearing a wingtip collar, and this guy's beard's in the way you can't even see what he's wearing. And this one looks more like a modern turned down shirt collar. Men's suits. We're losing the hourglass look over this time period. It's completely gone. And now we're moving into a much more somber, really, in some cases for professional businessmen, darker color, more tubular looks. And we're going to move into more of a societal trend of men wearing dark suits with certain ones being worn during the day and certain ones being worn during the evening. So we've got that that's similar to the women, but also we're going to have a few new suits that come in for different activities. We've got more choices, but that whole nipped in waist, puff shirt, or puff jacket sleeve of the romantic period, it goes away. So the first coat is the tailcoat, and this is going to move through time to being a coat that is just worn in the evening, but at the beginning of the crinoline period, it's still being worn during the day. By the end of it, we're going to wear it just for evening formal wear. It's off, and when it was worn in the evening, it was black, sometimes had black velvet lapels, and of course, it was worn no matter whether it was early or later in the period, it was worn unbuttoned and open. So here's a few, and all of these are dark colored. You can see the funny older gentleman on the right in an 1850s tailcoat, and the gentleman in the middle that is moving more towards the formal wear look that we recognize today. And the guy on the left has uh definitely this is a more formal, it even says at the bottom of this illustration, evening dress. So when it was worn for formal wear, a gentleman would wear a stiff white shirt and either a black vest, or this guy on in the middle has a white vest on, either a white bow tie or earlier on a black bow tie, but the tailcoat itself would be black and black trousers. There will become a certain type of black trousers that go with an evening formal wear tailcoat that have some sort of trim, either ribbon or braid down the outseam on the outside of the trousers that identifies them as formal wear trousers. But this is where we're going with the tailcoat. It's going to go away from being something worn at any time. The second most common coat, and actually probably in the crinoline period, this is the most popular coat, was the frock coat, which we had before. It's the one with the skirts in the front. And in the United States, it becomes known popularly as a Prince Albert coat because the Prince of Wales was Prince Albert was known for wearing this coat all the time. So it's the same thing. The frock coat, most important thing for you to remember is it had tails, or it had skirts all the way in the front. But now you can see the waist is not nipped in, the skirt doesn't kick out, right? The fullness of the hourglass skirts are gone, and as we get into this period, what's going to happen is there's going to be kind of a dress code for respectable businessmen to wear a frock coat in the afternoons for business wear. And for a while, it's going to be popular to have one color of coat, one color of vest, and a different color of pants. And you can see an example here. Here's from the 1850s. We've still got a little bit of the nipped in waist there, little touch of puff in the sleeve, but you can see it's much shorter. They don't have to be the long to the knee type frock coat skirts. And in these designs here, you can see another thing that happens is the waistline itself, because there is a seam in these suit coats. It drops from the normal waist to being a little bit lower. And here are three gentlemen wearing three different frock coats. It could be single-breasted, could be double-breasted, could be worn buttoned, or like this guy has one button buttoned. But it is definitely a proper, official looking, as I said, respectable gentleman's outfit. Now, this guy in the middle is wearing what looks to be a suit, a three-piece suit made out of the same fabric for the coat and the vest and the trousers. Whereas this gentleman on the left, he's got these fabulous plaid trousers, what looks like a velvet waistcoat or vest, and his frock coat is worn open, and he even has velvet lapels or velvet collar on his frock coat, which is a little different. And this gent over here has covered up his vest entirely, and he has a different colored trousers along with his dark frock coat. Here's just a little drawing to show you the difference, right? Here is our 1845 silhouette from the last of the Romantic period. As we move further in history, it's going to be much straighter cut, and I think you can see that right here. And this one on the right demonstrates how they could be shorter lengths, not just to the knee. Gentleman on the left in this slide is wearing a three-piece frock suit. You can definitely see that all three pieces are the same fabric. And that is going to be the beginning of what we think of today as the three-piece businessman suit, where all the fabrics match. The photograph on the right is a picture of Ira Aldrich, a very famous actor from this time period, wearing his frock coat, and he does not have it all three pieces match. He's got a little bit of a patterned waistcoat, and it looks like lighter colored trousers, and he even is wearing several medals or what have you, little decorations on his. Here's a new one. There are a couple new ones, and it's referred to as a morning coat, and it actually came about from a riding jacket, a riding coat. But the identifier for a morning coat is that it's cut away in the front. There, it looks like the skirts of a frock coat had been gradually curved away from the front, and it's got skirts in the back, like tails in the back, but it doesn't have coat skirts in the front. Let me show you. Here's a drawing of one. So in this slide, you can see two examples of an early morning coat um, from the 1860s. This coat is going to develop more in the next time period, but you can see the idea here where the garment itself has been cut away. It looks like a frock coat has been chopped right in the front to reveal the front of the trousers. And this illustration shows you how on the side it's been curved back, and there still is length on the back of the coat, but the front has been curved away. This is another new coat. This is called a sack jacket, and or it's also referred to as a lounge jacket or a lounge suit. And this is the beginning of what we know as businessman's regular old suit today. This is where it started. This is a much more comfortable suit. It's not tight. It comes into popularity about 1850, and it's pretty square cut. There aren't a lot of seams in this. The sleeves are straight, has a small collar, small lapels, and oftentimes was worn buttoned in different ways. In this illustration, this photograph, this gentleman's got his buttoned with the top button and then just kind of swings back. Um, and he's got what looks to be a coat out of one fabric, a vest out of something else, and those pants may be something else in addition. But it's a more comfortable coat, and this is going to be used at first as more informal wear for sports, for going out, doing everyday kind of things, but not necessarily at the beginning was worn by upper class people. This was not worn by upper class people for a while. Here are some examples from the 1860s, and you can see in this drawing how it's relatively simple. It's not, complicated, pretty boxy looking, shorter suit coat, although some of them can be long. You can see on the center photograph, this gentleman's dark one is kind of mid thigh, so it is kind of long here, but it's going to get even shorter. You can see the illustration on the right of the summer suit, probably of lightweight wool or linen. Light colored cream suit is much shorter than the other two, and that's going to be a choice. Here is a really crazy suit. The idea of having plaids, I told you was popular. Well, here's this guy has really done it up. This is a plaid three-piece suit. And they also made things out of tweed and houndstooth check and sometimes stripes. But this gives you an idea of the cut of a sack suit and how it looks a lot more comfortable compared to some of those other things that have been worn. And here's a couple of illustrations uh, of two different guys wearing these. And as a matter of fact, the photograph on the right is the Prince and Princess of Wales, and the prince, Prince Albert, is wearing a sack suit. And this was worn out in the country, um, and he's wearing it with a bowler hat here. But royalty could wear these for leisure time activities. So the suits in general from the crinoline time period buttoned up much higher than today's suits. And like I said, sometimes they'd button them in different ways. Sometimes they'd leave the middle buttons undone to show off the vest or whatever. But the whole thing is pretty much a higher. It's referred to as a gorge. How high towards the throat a suit jacket buttons, and these buttoned pretty darn high. The vests still could have lapels, still could be out of fancy fabric. Um, and in the daytime, they ended right above the waist, could be single or double breasted. In the evening time, they are going to be a little bit longer waisted because they're going to wear, like the tailcoats, which are cut back and a little bit higher than the waist, and it becomes more traditional to wear a single-breasted vest for evening wear. The trousers, well, a bunch of things happen, but pretty much overall, the instep straps go away. There are going to be a couple different kinds of styles of pants widths. They're going to get more tubular in the 60s, more straight up and down. For a while, they are going to be worn longer at the back than in the front of the shoe, which is interesting. And this, for a while, is also a place where a man can show off a little bit of his personality, especially in the daytime and for sports activities, to have um, a patterned pair of trousers. And in order to keep these up, we're not really wearing belts. They are wearing suspenders, or they're also referred to as braces in England, to hold their trousers up. And sometimes these trousers that are higher waisted than today's could also have a buckle added at the back to just kind of cinch these trousers in. And here's a couple pairs of fancy trousers. Smaller checks and then big. I'm not sure if that's plaid or what that is, but that's definitely a pattern that is not traditional. We also are going to have a sportswear kind of pants that comes in, and these are referred to as knickerbockers, or short name is knickers. And these are kind of like the really early knee breeches we saw at the turn of the 1800s, but they're a little fuller at the knee and had a cuff right below the knee, and these were worn for sports activities. You wouldn't see anybody, wearing these to go to work. Here's a picture of a gentleman in a knickerbocker suit towards the end of our period. Nice checked country suit, this is referred to. And this outfit, he's got a sack jacket, a vest, and then knicker pants. And that all match. And this would be a lovely ensemble to wear to the country, to go for a walk or a hike or whatever. The hair of the guys during this time period is a little long, I think. Oftentimes it's short and back, but it's really long on the top, and they wear it curly, and sometimes it looks messy. Sometimes they part it. But the biggest thing having to do with men's hair is their facial hair. Lots of guys wore beards and mustaches and big sideburns that were referred to as Dundrearies. That was a name of a character in a play during this time period. The play was called My American Cousin, and there was kind of an eccentric character in the play named Mr. Dundreary, and the original actor who played that part had really big, fluffy sideburns, and so they got named after that. But in the 1860s, it was not cool to not have any facial hair if you, particularly if you were a businessman and married. you would definitely have some facial hair. And even if you were single, having at least a mustache was popular. So let's look at some. Here's some examples of Dundreary, bushy, mutton choppy, like sideburns. This guy right here, he's got some really extravagant ones, and his are connected to a mustache. This guy's are separate, but they're kind of sloppy looking. And then here's just two other gentlemen's facial hair. He's got this almost looks like a neck beard, right? Looks kind of Amish. No mustache, but this low beard. It doesn't cover his chin, it covers underneath. And then also mustaches and goatees where you just have the hair growing right out of your chin were popular. And hats. The top hat is still around. That's numero uno hat for gents. Second would be bowlers or derbies, which we've seen before. And then there's a variation of straw hats, particularly in the South for plantation owners and people who farmed and things like that. This is one example of a popular hat that was worn by particularly landowners. It is called a wide awake, and it's a low crown hat that has a wide brim. And most of the times these were straw, but every once in a while, they were made out of felt. And we also have a variety of soft caps. So let's just look at a few more hats. Okay, we've got top hats that could be extremely tall. If you remember Abraham Lincoln in his stovepipe hat, this is that time period. So top hats, bowlers, the round crowned, very, very short curled brim hat that is popular for more middle class guys and for sportswear. And we also have, here's some examples of different types of this wide awake hat. This one's felt, this one looks straw. And here's an example of it's kind of like a newsboy cap here for soft caps, variations on that. Footwear is pretty plain. We're going to have laced shoes being the most popular. These are pretty early 1850s men's shoes. The toe was kind of squared off round. But they also start wearing, since we now have rubber and elastic, these elastic sided boots, short boots that you could just pull on, didn't need any laces, or you could have short boots that did lace up the front. And spats. We had spats last time. We're still going to have spats that are able to be worn over the shoe, particularly for sportswear. And then accessories. The guys don't have that much. Um, Canes for walking or for necessity if somebody had a disability. Umbrellas were carried. Gloves were worn. Is specifically at night, but also could be worn during the daytime. And the jewelry that the guys had might be something to for his neck tie, to pin his tie to, especially if it was a looser thing. Sometimes they would pin to the shirt. There might be button studs instead of buttons on the shirts and cufflink kind of things. Lots of watches and watch chains because these are still pocket watches. So fancy watch chains, and rings of subtle, not tons, but especially if a guy was married, he would have a ring on. So that's men in the crinoline period.